Plant Landfill Committee, 22nd of February at 3 p.m. I'll declare it open. Are there any apologies? Being no apologies, public forum. Now, we've had no request for public forum, but we have had an email received with a number of questions from the Tito Bay people. And in that, she's put that she wants it treated as an OA. So we've passed that on to the officers to be treated in the normal manner. Everyone got that email? I guess they did. Yep. Yes. Okay. Conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? Any notifications of extraordinary business? Being none. Confirmation of minutes. I'll move that the minutes of the last 16th of November be a true and correct record. Someone like to second that? Councillor Duncan.
Seconded.
Thank you. Are there any what's the word? You know what I mean. Anything in it that needs to be changed?
Nope.
I'll put in the motion. All those in favour, aye. Carried. Aye. Okay, so we'll report. We will move to the water treatment 6.1 review, and we have Ian Dennis from Wellington Water.
Colin Crampton, actually.
Oh, Colin, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's all right with the committee, I was just going to make some opening remarks and deal with the issue in two parts. Would that be all right, Chair?
That's correct. Fine. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to present the review findings and to discuss them. I thought it would be best to discuss it in two parts. The first one about the review itself, understanding the nature of the review, and then whether you've got any questions on the review. And then secondly, discuss the implementation plan to address the review findings. So if you're happy to take those conversations in two parts, I would proceed to discuss part one. So on the 17th of August 2021, we had a sludge blanket overflow at the Porirua Wastewater Treatment Plant. A discharge that resulted in pathogens entering the environment, which is not what we're not what the wastewater treatment plant is designed to do, nor what Porirua or Wellington Water expect of it. And that was about the 11th non-compliance and default in the current contract, and we drew a line under it at that point and said enough is enough. So we're going to carry out a review on the Veolia contract and the whole operating model Wellington Water overseas. And that's what you have in front of you today, the full report. So I'm very happy to answer any questions on the report now before I take you through our plans for implementation. So if members have any discussion points on the review, very happy to take them.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Look, my first question is, you're happy with the report, with what's come out?
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I think it was. Sorry, I'm very happy with the recommendations from the review, and I'm very pleased that it's done what it's designed to do, which was to stop an underperforming model and put it back on track for coming right.
Great. Now, but my second question then is, later on in 6.2, we're going to be told that we need another $500,000 for this consent to go ahead. How much did this review cost us?
It cost the council nothing. It was done by Wellington Water within our management fee, which is funded by all the councils. So we've done it within our existing budget.
Great, thanks.
And when you say there's another $500,000, what do you? Could you just update me on what you mean by that?
Yeah, in the chart on 6.2, it says $447,000 more dollars are going to be needed for this consent to proceed.
Yes, I'm not sure what that is. Is anybody on the call who could help me with that? Is that
through the chair? What that's saying is in that project, Colin, the estimate for the consent is blowing out, and it's more a question about how Wellington Water will be addressing the full cost of the consent within the envelope that Porirua City Council funds Wellington Water.
Okay, Andrew. Is that something I need to follow up, or is that going to be addressed today?
Through the chair.
You're there, Paul. Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. My understanding is that that information didn't really need to come to this committee. It is going to, as Andrew says, it'll be balanced up amongst the envelope of funding that has been provided by Porirua City. We're not seeking additional funding.
Okay, Councillor Hayward, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora ki koutou katoa me tēnei wā. Ngā mihi, Colin, thank you for being on the call. Obviously, the circumstances leading to the generation of this report and the outcomes and recommendations contained in the specific independent report are quite brutal in terms of their assessment of the situation that has led up to this point. I have all my other questions are related to the implementation, but there's one set of questions which probably fits better into the triggering of the report, specifically the relationship between Wellington Water and Greater Wellington. Can I just confirm that Greater Wellington has confirmed that they will take no further action in relation to what I would describe as the trigger event you mentioned in the first sentence of your report, the 17th of August sludge overflow?
Yeah, I had that on my implementation list. What I've done there is I've spoken to Nigel Corrie, because we were very honest with him at the time, Councillor, that this had occurred. The difficulty was there was very little evidence. You know, it was a photo taken by one of our staff members that triggered the view that it had overflowed. There's a lack of documentation to pinpoint the actual occurrence of it, but we've been very open with the Greater Wellington Regional Council that a sludge blanket overflow did occur for some time, which we can't confirm. They have yet to make a decision on that. My understanding is that they have 6 months to follow it up, which must be almost due. And I have spoken to the chief executive to give me a nod if they are going to proceed to prosecution, and I haven't heard from him yet.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, can I then confirm, as your understanding, Colin, on what date did officials from Greater Wellington Regional Council be made aware to the satisfaction of Wellington Water that there was a potential breach of the relevant resource consent in regards to that 17th August event? Was it the 12th of October?
The 12th of October. I'd have to follow that up, but as soon as we were aware of the event, we launched the review within a week, Councillor. I think a couple of weeks. I can certainly chase the dates back, but we told the Greater Wellington Regional Council of the event verbally when we announced the review to proceed. So okay. I think we'll be able to chase back and show you that it happened almost immediately.
Perhaps I can help, because I did ask this information and I have related on to the CE of Porirua, the mayor and the chair of the council for Wellington Water, the elected members, was also aware of my questioning. My understanding was, in that email sent back in December, was that Wellington Water had confirmed the veracity of the claim that there was a sludge discharge that would have been potentially in breach of the consent conditions on the 12th of August, which would be 2 months after the actual event in question. On the 21st, I certainly was informed, and other counts, and I assume that was where the public announcement was made, if I recall correctly, of an independent report. Prior to that point, as I understand, there was no public notification of there being a potential breach of the discharge consent.
I'm not sure
I'm just trying to understand if all those dates are correct. why there would be a 9-day differential between Wellington Water coming to the conclusion that it felt that there was a potential breach and the 21st of October when it made it public.
Look, Councillor, you just have to take me on my word that I'll document that for you. I suspect the difference is that the announcement from Wellington Water to confirm it was after we'd done the analysis of all of the plant metrics to make sure we could quantify and give that advice in terms of our explanation of what we thought happened to GW. That would have taken a number of weeks to do that. But I'm very happy to lay out the verbal signals and the discussions we had following the event of the 16th or 17th of August in terms of what we said to people. And you know, from my recollection, we were very, very quick to get out and explain to people what had happened. It would have taken some time to document exactly what happened and make a report to the GW, and hence the delay, I would imagine.
Councillor Hayward, could I just ask, I mean, we're talking about history now, and we've had the report that has been put into place to fix the problems. So I don't see the necessary to put the officers to have to explain something. It happened. The report's now being done and reviews being done, and it's about moving forward to get the right answers.
Mr. Chair, if I may speak to your point, we as elected representatives are obligated to hold to account those above us on behalf of the people of Porirua and Wellington City as well. There seems to be, in my opinion, a potential of an alternative narrative with regards to its Wellington Water's compliance with the existing, or to put it this way, operative resource consent regarding coastal discharge. If by your comment beforehand would lead me to suggest that we have, as elected councillors, no responsibility to check the working of Wellington Water as to whether they are sincerely and proactively complying with the resource consent, then one would ask, especially in the public, what is the purpose of elected representatives holding people to account? But
the resource consent is in the process of being, the hearings, you know, the submissions have been made, etc. We all acknowledge that, and we all acknowledge we've got problems, and this is about moving forward to fix them. Now, then they're saying accountable. Do you want us to question and say, well, Wellington Water, you're fired, get somebody else? I mean, it's, you know, they've acknowledged there's issues. The review has acknowledged that, and it's about moving forward.
Mr. Chair, speaking again to your point, I had read thoroughly the report. It does not actually convey my concern about the 9-day difference between what has been sent to me by email by officials by Wellington Water to the notification of a consent for an event that happened 2 months prior. And I do acknowledge that it would be hard to categorize any notification as immediate and as it explicitly relates to the resource consent provision around this. But surely 9 days is certainly not unreasonable to have known for Wellington Water to have given me information as to whether or not they should have taken more, should have been far more proactive on notifying on the current, that is the operative, not the resource consent application process as you have tried to allude to, Mr. Chair, but rather the operative, the current. What are the rules as they currently stand? Does not make any point. I don't have any case here to make any questions about implementation. That is what, as Colin suggested, part 2 of the series of the presentation he's given. I am merely talking about the trigger as to why part 1 was required and the circumstances around that.
Yeah, can I answer that now, Sir Chairman? I would say that I've spoken to Nigel Corey directly and the enforcement team at Greater Wellington Regional Council. They require no more information from us around the report we've provided for that particular event. So it will be determined by them around the relationship to the consent. I'm very happy to go back and address by a note back to Wendy the difference in the timeframe you've described. Very happy to take that as an action.
Okay.
That answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Democratic Services, did I put that, did I move that motion and get a seconder for that?
No, we still require a seconder, Councillor.
Yeah, I thought that was the case. I just suddenly had that thought. Someone like to second that this report be considered?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Okay, any more discussion?
Mr. Chair, I believe it's now time for part two, as Colin had alluded to.
Okay, all right, you're correct. Okay, Colin, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go over a little bit of detail there, Chairman, on the point that the other councillors raised. So in terms of the sludge blanket overflow, you'll recall that was caused by, when we investigated that, by the organic load in the plant being at a very high level at the time of the failure. And when we investigated into some of the root causes of that failure, one of them was the relationship between the plant and the disposal of sludge at the landfill. I'm pleased to report to the committee that discussions between ourselves and Porirua City Council have resolved that problem, and the plant no longer carries high loads of organic material. And when it does that, there's a much greater buffer in the whole system to take changes in performance of the plant. So we do believe it's back at its normal levels. We've just completed installing alarms on the 3 clarifiers, so that there is an automated tool that will alarm the system if the sludge blanket is coming up towards an overflow point, and so that takes the uncertainty out of whether it did or did not. We now have it fully measured and automated. And as the councillor has pointed out, we're still to hear from Greater Wellington Regional Council as to whether they will follow up on that particular issue. In terms of the review itself, as a consequence of the review, the contract manager for Veolia and the contract manager at Wellington Water have moved on from their roles, and so we have Veolia have appointed a temporary contract manager into the role for Veolia, and we have done the same at Wellington Water. We are now building up the organisational structures to support the contract in the review's findings, and we'll be able to keep you up to date on that. In parallel with the review, Veolia implemented a self-review on their own management capability, and they have made a number of decisions that they have already started to implement. But what we will do is ensure that is all brought into the same implementation plan that then we provide it. So in 2 weeks' time, the implementation plan will be finished, and we'd be happy to forward it to the committee for their information. The implementation plan is overseen by a steering group made up of Andrew Dalziel from Porirua City Council on behalf of councillors, Helmut Modlik on behalf of Mana Whenua across the region, Veolia Chief Executive for New Zealand, and myself. And that steering group will be able to see the implementation plan and sign it off in about a month's time. In addition to that, the board oversees the ongoing. Our board has oversight on the progress of that implementation plan, and of course it's reported to you at this joint venture committee. And every month at the board meeting, we invite the CE of the Australasian CE of Veolia to come on and discuss with us his support for the implementation of this review. Now, it's early days, but all the signals are good. But it will take us some time to make all of the corrections. But I do believe we're on the right path. But you just need to keep holding our feet to the fire on delivering that implementation plan as we progress it. The last matter I would bring your attention to is that we are still under control of an abatement notice on the performance of the UV plant at the plant itself, because we have upgraded that to make sure that we can UV treat all of the effluent arriving at the plant. And due to COVID, we are unable to commission the new plant because these specialist resources need to come from Australia. And so we will be approaching the Greater Wellington Regional Council to extend the period of that abatement notice to allow those people to come to New Zealand to sign off the plant and make it operable. So there's still a little bit of work that you should be aware of in there. I would also like to point out the 2 other things that happened in parallel with the implementation plan. and that is that we've had a series of meetings with our Bay, our Say, and a number of other parties around the region around around how we portray data and information onto our website in real time. And we've just recruited and have in place now a person in our wastewater management team who's going to oversee the types of reports and the methodology for getting that material up in real time. When I say real time, of course, it's awkward, isn't it? Because when you take samples at Titahi Bay for swimming, they are cultured in a laboratory for 24 hours, and then we post them. And then on the plant itself, when we're aware of anything going wrong, we've got to lift our game in terms of being able to notify the public and council and everybody, as those events happen, to gain more trust in the fact that we're running a transparent operation out there. So very happy to come back and see you next time and give you an update on the ongoing implementation of the review. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Where's he gone? Can I have a question there?
You're muted, Ewan.
I think the chair has temporarily disappeared, and he's probably coming back in now. Sorry.
Shall I put a question to you, Colin, now anyway?
Absolutely.
Okay, Colin, look, I'll take you back to the beginning of when Veolia first took over in the first place. One of their first moves was to cut the staff at the plant by a quarter. And their explanation when I raised that concern with them was that they were able to bring staff from other plants to help supplement. There was no manuals or anything developed at the time for the plant, and so how anybody coming from other plants would handle things was a question. But that was at the same time as they were explaining away a dry weather bypass from the plant that was caused, they said, by operator fatigue. I didn't see anything in the review that would sort of give you control over the number of staff or that sort of thing that they would have at the plant.
I would say they probably regret that comment about now, to tell you the truth, but they have now implemented a new structure, and that includes a number of new resources inside the team that still works within the current contract price, which would suggest that they underestimated the resourcing. So I think your point is that I don't think they thought that through.
Thanks.
Jeff, you're the deputy, I think, aren't you? I think you'll need to take over.
Okay.
Apologies, councillors. There is no deputy appointed to this committee.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that was my
Councillor Morell is coming in now. Sorry.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, you're back.
Sorry, everything just went blank and my computer just stopped. I'm back on, so what have I missed?
Mike's had a question which has been answered. It's now Ross's turn.
Ross, okay, thank you. Ross. Unmute.
Sorry, I understood it was Jeff that had the next question. I mean, I've got a question if you like, but you go first, Jeff.
Is this on the report? Are we still on the report?
We're on.
Mr. Chair, we're still on part B of the report that's been tabled.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you. These questions are regards to the implementation. I'm happy to hear that there, within the next 2 weeks, there is an implementation plan to be finalised, and yes, would request a copy of that to be sent to members of this committee. I guess, what is the expectation by Wellington Water as to how things have been improved? Will it be through reporting to that implementation plan at subsequent meetings of this committee? Or alternatively, will it be reporting to the recommendations that are in the initial reports to this committee?
If I understand that question correctly, we will produce an implementation plan to address the recommendations from the report, and that implementation plan will lay out a series of actions and milestones that will reach a point where we can conclude the majority of those recommendations have closed out. We have asked Raveen Jadaram, who was one of the authors of the report, to come back at that point to do a review to give you independent confidence that it's all been implemented, and that will all be laid out in the implementation plan. The only thing I'm unable to give you any advice on is the time it will take to complete all of that, because all of that work is carrying on at the moment, being calculated. So it will be all pretty transparent, but it won't be a short time frame. It'll take a fair while to, for example, the toughest one in there is around the culture between Wellington Water and Veolia to rebuild the trust between the parties and make sure that we can extract the best out of the contract. But, that will take some time to do, Councillor.
Mr. Chair. Following on from that answer, how should the public quantify whether Wellington Water and Veolia have be able to successfully implement those measures? Because as that last example entails, it's very hard for the general public to get a steer on that because it's hard to quantify. So how does Wellington Water propose to make that easier for the public to ascertain progress?
Well, we will rely on the steering group of Andrew and Helmut to keep the the parties to account in terms of the quantifiable milestones. Those are reasonably straightforward to do. In terms of the qualitative ones, which is what you're asking, we should rely on that independent reviewer coming back and interviewing the parties to give you some comfort that is improved significantly to the point where we can stop the implementation plan and get it back to normal operations, which is what we'd all like to do.
Mr. Chair. I note as well as mentioned in the previous answer by Colin regarding a dedicated staffer around the development of improved communication materials mentioned earlier. Is that a full-time employed role, or is that being an individual being tasked to other sites regarding in connection to this report?
Well, that's a great question, because I've had a lot of discussion with Jeremy McGibbon on the phone here, and we have agreed that we will resource all of the new positions in the Wellington Water Wastewater Services Group, to over-resource them, Councillor, to make sure that we make the progress. And this communication role is a full-time dedicated resource to the wastewater treatment communications with both councillors and the general public. And when we get that under control, we can then decide whether or not we can optimise those resources, and that all comes from within the existing management fee of Wellington Water. Okay, one last Mr. Chair. This one probably actually drifts out of Part B, but I'll ask it and then it can be aligned to whichever part of this report needs to go to. With regards to point 20 of the document tabled, it mentions that Wellington Water are contemplating working with Ngāti Toa around the application for the new resource consent. Is Wellington Water contemplating a change to the resource consents design? That is, I'm talking not about the duration of the consent as mentioned in the report, as part of its work with Ngāti Toa. Well, I think, Andrew, I might need Andrew's help here again. The resource consent, we paused it. We asked for your permission to do that because the performance of the plant was sufficiently different than what we'd assumed when we put the resource consent in, that we wanted to go back and test all those parameters and bring a better solution back to the table to then recommence the consenting process. My understanding is that is all going to plan, and within the parameters we originally were seeking the consent on. But I'll just ask Paul to confirm that, if I can see him down the bottom there.
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Hayward. I think what you're referring to is a set of conditions that we're proposing to bring forward as part of the consent application that haven't been there as part of the original application. So we are working through with Ngāti Toa on what those might look like. They're conditions that relate specifically to the mitigation of cultural harm. We haven't made them public yet because we're making sure that Ngāti Toa agree with them. We have been working with Porirua City on those as well. So Teresa Minogue certainly was looking at them on behalf of David Down most recently. So we'll be able to share them with you shortly, hopefully, as long as Ngāti Toa are okay with where we've got to.
That answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Leggett.
Thanks, Chair. Most of my questions have already been answered. The comment I would make is that a lot of the stuff that's coming up now and what's going to happen going forward and putting things into place, we're on the back foot. And the way we're going to get ourselves onto the front foot is by making sure, through some of the things that we're going to do, that the projects that we have, and we've seen laid out in the rest of the paper, are actually completed. And then we'll know that the plant is able to operate up to capacity, 1,500 litres a second or whatever, and we wouldn't be running around chasing our tails, asking when, how things are going to happen. So on that point, I don't know whether it's now is the right time to ask or in the next set. I just wondered, Colin, you talked a little bit about staff at Wellington Water and Veolia. How long will it be before those staff are in place so that these things that you're talking about do start to happen?
So what we've, I'm not fully up to date on the Veolia. We had a steering group meeting earlier in the day, Councillor, and we've got a bit of an idea, but we're going to have a full report at the next steering group. But on the Wellington Water side, we've agreed a structure, and we're going to contract resources into that structure fully over the next few weeks. In fact, we've already got 2 in there. We've got our contract manager and wastewater services manager in place. And we're doing that to make sure we can get on with those recommendations straight away. But long term, we want those to be permanent resources inside Wellington Water. So we'll start a recruitment process in parallel. It's obviously not good to start with people who are on contract and then convert to permanent. That creates another amount of change we have to deal with. But we're focused on getting on with some of the easy changes we can do now by just getting our resources up to speed. So you should be confident that we're well resourced to start the implementation. We're probably a little bit worried about the fact that we have to make a cultural conversion from a series of contractors to permanent in-house resources over the next 6 to 9 months.
Supplementary, Chair. So that's half the equation, Colin. So I guess we have to rely on you to make sure that Veolia play their part, because it's only by the 2 of you working together that we're actually going to get delivery of the things that are, or the outcomes that we want to see that have been recommended from the report.
Yeah, so Veolia have reset their, quite correct, let me just come back to that. Veolia have reset their organisational structure in parallel with the review, and they've started to fill that structure already with a number of appointments. And I think if I understood correct, Andrew, if you could help me, I think there was 2 that they're struggling to find at the moment. But they have agreed to lay that entire structure out and give us an update on resourcing at the steering group meeting that Andrew sits on with Helmut. And I think you can be assured that we have enough independence to hold our feet to the fire on both sides to deliver those resources. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, through the chair, just to add to Colin's comments, the key position for Veolia in the region, that's the difficult one to fill, the experienced hands. And Veolia has brought somebody in to cover that. They've advertised and haven't been able to find a suitable replacement. They'll advertise again. And in the current environment where we've got things like the 3 waters transition going ahead, the government's announced that it wants 150 staff in that transition unit. That's just coming out. And with the borders closed and people not coming in, it's a very difficult environment to get experienced people in. So my point of view, or what I'm saying in the steering committee, is what's plan B for Veolia? You want to retain this work in the Wellington region. You can contract in other experienced people from your organisation to keep it going if you can't get that person. And there's a conversation about growing everybody under that person so that the experience really does lift up. So we'll get right down to knowing every position and every person who's in there, because the report proper shows that this wasn't about money from the participant councils or lack of money. This was about experience and attitude and procedures and everything else from the Veolia point of view. So we do really, and I'm comfortable at the moment that the person who is there is doing the very best they can. When we have bad weather events, and if we have a discharge, then so be it. We know it's not happening because of attitude or procedures. He's doing, or they're doing their very best at the moment to control those situations.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions? Yes.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I forgot to ask one. Do you mind if I ask this? Ask it now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I also want to just go over the general issue. Obviously, the report has revealed the extremely limited nature of penalties that can be issued by Wellington Water to a contractor for breach of contract or potential breach of contract as part of its tools of restitution. And notwithstanding the recommendations of the report and the work being done proactively between both parties, can, again, Wellington Water give some commentary as to whether or not it can assist as part of the transition into the new entity as part of the Three Waters reforms, a deeper look as to whether or not the penalties are the penalty quantas should be increased significantly to serve as a fiscal disincentive to any contractor that is hired to do work, which is so important to our community's health and well-being.
The contract has been tendered and awarded between us and Veolia, and it has a whole series of penalties in it, councillor. And those are difficult to change now. I'm not sure I agree that they're not hurtful. The problem is that because this contract leaves the condition of the asset and the performance of the asset as a risk that the owners in Wellington Water look after, where they have to look after the operational rules, what we did is we left the penalty systems on their where they make operational mistakes, and we've fined them for those mistakes. But what we've done is asked for an abeyance on the fines that related to breaches of resource consent due to asset failures, because if we're not careful, if we were to fine them, we could end up in a legal discussion as to whether or not they were indeed Veolia's accountability, or in fact councils or our own accountability. And all that would have done would have been to spiral the culture into a very combative relationship. So we have left those off for the time being until the contract can find a stable platform. But the penalties will resume to disincentivize Veolia from making operational mistakes. And if you think of the one, of course, that there's a couple that have closed out on Porirua, for example, like forgetting to turn the UV back on when they've finished work out there. We can't have that just going unpenalised. It's very important for that to be clear.
Okay, thank you. I think we've discussed this issue enough. We look forward to, we look forward to the findings. Now we look forward to the implementation and the report backing. So I'm going to put the report. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We'll now move to 6.2. I'll move that the report be received. Do I have a seconder? The Mayor, thank you. Does David down or Anna Hector there? David there?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll ask Anna Hector to read to the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm through the chair. I'll take that the paper was read and make the point that the two updates that I had, Mr. Crampton has already updated the group on through his previous ones, which is the installation of the clarifier monitoring system in item number 9, and the fact that the abatement notice in relation to the UV system is 90% complete, except for the final item, which is the commissioning of the UV, which has been delayed during getting people into the country. So those are the only updates, but happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Leggett?
It may be how long's a piece of string, but so when is it likely that the UV plant will be commissioned? I mean, we have been waiting and waiting, and I'm not blaming you, forever for this damn thing. And, you know, why don't people can come from Australia now?
Yes, so the staff member who's required to do the work is booked a flight for the 28th of February. So commissioning will happen in March. It's the final piece of the puzzle that just needs to be completed before we can turn the system on.
Right, thank you.
Okay, being no further discussion.
Yeah, I do. I have a
Oh, sorry, Councillor Duncan, sorry, I didn't see you there.
Oh, right. Okay, it relates to page 51, the capital project update. We discussed earlier the 447,000 extra. Can you explain that to me again? I didn't understand where that money was coming from.
Well, through the chair, if you think about the money Porirua City Council gives Wellington Water every year, and if you think about OPEX, this financial year, we will pay across to Wellington Water $10.4 million overall, again, over the 3 waters. And what's happening there is they're saying this particular project's going to cost us more than budget. And so they balance out in other areas, other OPEX areas, the spend. So they'll have to make savings in other areas. What I can tell you is by the 30th of June, our current planning is that they'll spend 10.7 million against a budget of 10.4. And we've asked them to do some extra work during the year. We wanted a western catchment because Ngāti is thinking of developing there early, and we hadn't done a 3 waters catchment study there. That's about $200,000. So if we can get to the end of the year with everything we've done in the 3 waters space, if you think of the Parramatta emergency, the wastewater emergency, I had to put OPEX towards that. We'll be looking pretty good, Councillor Duncan. Exactly where they're going to get it from, you've heard Colin say, well, we'll dip into the management fee that we pay to help out with the wastewater treatment plant, etc. I'm prepared to leave that to them.
Thanks.
All good. Okay, I'll move the report then. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now move on to 6.3, which is the Landfill Joint Committee update, the 2nd of December. Comment, I'll move the recommendation or put the, move it. Councillor Duncan seconded. David, do you want to come in now, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things to draw your attention to. The odour complaints have dropped off remarkably. It looks like the accumulation of all the actions we took back in around September, October last year are working. There will be a couple of complaints to report on for the next report. It's been a long, hot summer, and we haven't completely escaped it. I also just want to draw your attention to, I've written quite a page on the emissions trading scheme liability and the impact that is likely to have on the charges that we'll need to set for the next financial year. It's a complex issue. I've tried to do my best to make it as simple as possible, but very happy to delve into that a little further if anyone's got questions on that. Otherwise, I'll take the report as read, Mr. Chair, and take any questions.
Councillor Leggett?
Thanks. Yeah, just on the ETS, given the rise in the cost of a unit, does it make an alternative use of the gas? Say, for example, in a gas engine to generate electricity, I can't remember what you told us in terms of how much gas there is and how much we could generate, but at what price does it make an alternative use of gas, say for electricity generation, make more sense?
Yeah, so through the chair, fundamentally it doesn't actually make that much difference. We're charged for the methane that's actually produced rather than how it is we dispose of it. However, we have almost reached the volume where there is potential for some alternative uses rather than simply burning it through the flare, and currently working with the party on whether there is a viability in using that gas in a nearby location, which is, I'll leave it at that if I may, Mr. Chair, and hopefully be able to report back on those conversations next time. But the difficult part, Councillor Leggett, is it is based on the methane that is produced rather than what it is you do with it.
Okay. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, Councillor Hayward. Yeah, see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David, and the officers for preparing the report. My questioning is also around the ETS, specifically point 22. I was, I guess, stunned to realise that 60%, 3/5 of the general waste charge would cover the ETS if carbon credits had to be purchased at $100. Does this? And I also look in the report and see that the relatively static domestic collection of general waste, what would therefore be the impact of a significant change in the amount of organic waste collected through our household collection service, and the impact that that would have on the overall quanta that we pay for credits?
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for that question. The majority of, if I can break it down to food waste, as opposed to more broadly organics, the majority of food waste that heads to the landfill is not actually residential, it's commercial. So if we were able to make a significant reduction in that was going to the landfill, then yes, we would see, without having had modelling done, we would see a reduction in methane. That's principally where it comes from. With regard to organic waste collected at curbside, again, we'd need to be modelling the financials of that and determining the viability versus the cost of reduction of the ETS.
Just one sub, please, Mr. Chair. Is there any possibility that we could look at an alternative funding model that ensures that for the food waste that's coming from a commercial provider, the charge is more fairly loaded on that side as opposed to residential properties, which again looks like the volume has not increased significantly? I'll be keen to see the R squared on that graph around collection from household and elsewhere.
Yeah, potentially it's possible because, as you might know, all of the commercial waste is privately collected and privately disposed. So I suppose there is at least a degree of difference there between that commercial waste stream and our residential waste stream. We are currently with our resource recovery waste minimisation team looking at options around resource recovery at Spicer Landfill, which does specifically include enabling a separate disposal point for organics, whereby that organic waste does not necessarily end up in the landfill. In early stages of discussion of what that type of facility might look like. Just coming back to your question though, yeah, I will open that up with our manager of waste resource recovery, waste minimisation. We can have that talk, and yeah, see what we think.
Thank you. No more questions,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
No, thank you. Okay, being no further discussion, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour, aye. Against, carried. 6.4, the wastewater treatment plant and landfill financial report, second quarter. I'll move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Duncan, for seconding it. And open again to you, David. You're in the hot seat.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Unremarkable financial report at the 6-month mark. The only thing I just want to draw your eye to is item 9. I've said that revenue looked to have fallen behind a little on the year-end forecast. Having seen the numbers for January, I can let you know that looks as it will correct itself, as we thought it might. January and February are typically quite high months of revenue, so I wouldn't take too much by that 3% behind forecast. But apart from that, again, take the report as read. And any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Leggett.
I suppose I could ask this dumb question offline, but in the wastewater treatment plant capital budget, what's the 20 million for this year?
Can I have either Jeremy or Anna answer that, please?
Is Susanna still on the line? She would be best to answer that.
It might, or Susanna, please. Yeah.
Looks like we'll have to come back to you, Councillor Leggett.
Through the chair, it'll be the you've got your big wastewater treatment tank in there, Ross. Your $44 million. It's the part of that. So it'll be carried over slightly. You're just getting to consent time. Most of your actual capital work down at the wastewater treatment plant, etc., is, you know, you've already discussed that it's more or less on time and going through. There's a bit of delay for COVID, but the big carryover amount is your massive big tank.
Yeah, I thought that might have been the case. Yep. I just needed that confirmed.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, being no further questions then, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Just at this point, before we close the meeting, this is Anna's last meeting with us today as Manager of Wastewater Contracts for Wellington Water. She's moving on. So thank you, Anna, for all that you've done and attended religiously our meetings and being there for us and answered in some situations the difficult questions. So we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's been a privilege working with you all.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay, I'll now declare the meeting closed. Oh no, I'm sorry, not closed. I'll move into public excluded for the reasons set out in the order paper. I'll move